Someone you love is crying over a secret they never had the courage to tell you. My beloved child, stop for a moment, because someone you love may be carrying words inside their heart that they have rehearsed 100 times, yet never found the courage to say to you. They may smile when you are around, act completely normal, and even change the subject whenever the conversation gets too close to what they truly feel. But there is something beneath that silence. Something emotional, something deeply personal, something they have been struggling to put into words. And the strangest part is this: you may have already noticed the change without understanding what caused it. A different tone. A longer pause. A message typed and suddenly deleted. A moment when their eyes seem to say more than their mouth ever could. Don't skip, because what comes next may completely change the way you understand their silence. There is a reason this person keeps holding back. It may not be because they stopped caring, it could be because they care so much that telling you the truth feels terrifyingly vulnerable. Perhaps they have wondered what would happen if they finally opened their heart and you didn't respond the way they secretly hoped. Perhaps they have been waiting for the perfect moment, only to watch one moment become another, and another, until silence became easier than honesty. But something has shifted recently. Their emotions are becoming harder to hide. The secret they have carried quietly may be pressing against the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. And if you have recently felt that something between you and this person is unfinished, don't dismiss that feeling too quickly. Stay till the end, because there is one possibility about their silence that you may not have considered, and it could explain why they have been acting so differently. Now listen carefully, because this is where the story becomes much more personal. The secret may not simply be about something they did, it may be about something they feel. They could be crying because they regret the words they never said, the moment they allowed to pass, or the truth they kept postponing because they were afraid of changing everything between you. Maybe they have imagined telling you exactly how much you mean to them, then stopped themselves at the last second. Maybe they have wondered whether you still think about them the way they think about you. And perhaps the most painful part is that they have no idea whether you would welcome the truth or walk away from it. Something huge is waiting for you in this story, because the silence may finally be reaching its limit, and the next revelation begins with the one thing they have been unable to admit. There is something about their silence that you may have misunderstood all this time. They are not necessarily quiet because they have nothing to say. Sometimes people become quiet when they have far too much to say and no idea where to begin. Think about the last time you were around this person. Was there a strange hesitation in their voice? Did they seem unusually thoughtful? Did they almost tell you something, then suddenly move the conversation somewhere else? Those little moments may have meant more than you realized. Because behind the calm exterior, there could be a private conversation happening inside their mind. Should I finally tell them? What if they already know? What if I lose what we have by saying it? And that is exactly why you need to stay until the end. Don't skip, because the secret may not be the confession you are expecting. It may reveal just how deeply this person has been affected by something that happened between you. But here is where everything becomes more emotional. There may have been a specific moment they keep returning to when they are alone. A conversation. A goodbye. A message. A look you gave them. Something you said casually that they remembered far more seriously than you ever imagined. You may have forgotten that moment completely, while they replayed it in their mind again and again, wondering what it really meant. And perhaps they have been crying not because they want to blame you, but because they wish they had been brave enough to tell you what they felt at the time. They may have wanted to say, "That moment mattered to me." They may have wanted to admit, "I cared more than I showed." But instead, they swallowed the words and carried on as if nothing had happened. Now something inside them is changing. The feelings they managed to hide before are becoming harder to keep buried, and that could be why their behavior has recently felt different. And before you assume you already know what this secret is, wait, because there is another layer. The truth they have hidden may involve something they were afraid you would misunderstand. Maybe they once stepped back when they actually wanted to come closer. Maybe they acted distant when they were secretly hoping you would notice. Maybe they appeared unaffected when, privately, your absence was weighing heavily on their heart. This is the part many people never see. Sometimes the person who looks the strongest is the one struggling hardest to explain what they feel. So if this message is reminding you of someone, don't rush to conclusions. Simply listen. Stay till the end, because the next part reveals what may have been stopping them from speaking all this time, and why their silence may finally be breaking. Something changed inside them the moment they realized you might not always be there to hear what they never said. That realization may have arrived quietly, perhaps during an ordinary night when everything around them became still and there was nothing left to distract them from their own thoughts. Suddenly, the memories became louder. Your voice. Your presence. The things they wished they had explained. And one thought may have returned again and again: what if I waited too long? That is where the emotion becomes difficult to hide. Because sometimes the deepest tears are not caused by losing someone, they come from realizing how many beautiful words were left trapped behind hesitation. This person may have wanted to tell you something for longer than you realize, but every time courage appeared, another question pushed it away. What if you laugh? What if you misunderstand? What if you have already moved on emotionally? What if telling you changes the connection forever? So they stayed silent. They watched. They waited. They pretended they were fine. But inside, the truth kept growing. And here is the detail you should not overlook: they may remember something about you that you never realized they noticed. A small habit. A particular expression. The way you reacted during a difficult conversation. A sentence you said once and completely forgot afterward. To you, it may have been an ordinary moment. To them, it may have become a memory they carried privately. That is why their emotions may feel confusing even to themselves. They are not simply remembering you, they are remembering how they felt when they were with you. And perhaps that is the secret they have struggled to explain. They may have discovered that their feelings became much deeper than they originally intended. At first, they could tell themselves it was temporary. Then they could call it attachment. Then they could convince themselves they simply missed the familiarity. But eventually, those explanations stopped working. Something huge is waiting for you in this story, because the truth they are hiding may have less to do with what happened between you and more to do with what happened inside them because of you. But there is one more reason they may have been crying that you need to understand before judging their silence. They may be afraid that you no longer feel the same way. Imagine carrying something precious inside your heart while having absolutely no guarantee that the person receiving it will protect it. That is the emotional risk they may be facing. They could be wondering whether they still have a place in your thoughts, whether you would recognize the meaning behind their words, or whether they missed the moment when honesty could have changed everything. And perhaps the hardest question has been sitting quietly inside them. If I finally tell them the truth, will they finally understand why I behaved the way I did? Don't skip. Stay till the end, because the next revelation goes deeper than a simple confession. It begins with the possibility that their silence was never about having nothing to say, it was about being afraid that once they said everything, there would be no way to take those words back. There is a moment people rarely talk about. The moment when hiding your feelings becomes more exhausting than admitting them. And this person may be approaching that moment now. For a long time, they may have convinced themselves that silence was the safer choice. They could keep their emotions private, continue with their routine, and avoid the uncertainty that comes with telling someone what is truly inside their heart. But lately, that strategy may not be working anymore. Something keeps bringing you back into their thoughts. A song, a familiar place, an old conversation, or even a completely ordinary moment can suddenly open the door to everything they tried to close away. And when that happens, the emotions may come rushing back with surprising intensity. They may remember what they wanted to tell you. They may remember what they should have said. And they may quietly wonder whether you ever realized how much they were holding back. Stay till the end, because this is where their hidden truth begins to take a completely different shape. What if the secret is connected to a decision they once made about you? Perhaps they decided to remain silent because they believed they were protecting the connection. Perhaps they convinced themselves that giving you space was the mature thing to do, even while their heart wanted the opposite. Maybe they saw an opportunity to speak and deliberately let it pass because they were waiting for a better moment. Then another opportunity came, and they waited again. Eventually, waiting became their pattern. But there is a strange thing about unspoken feelings: they do not always disappear simply because you refuse to acknowledge them. Sometimes they become stronger in the quiet. And this person may now be realizing that the thing they were most afraid of, telling you the truth, may be easier than continuing to carry everything alone. The tears may be coming from regret, longing, confusion, or simply the overwhelming weight of words that have been held inside for far too long. Don't skip, because the most important detail has not been revealed yet. And now comes the question that changes everything: what exactly are they afraid you will discover? Maybe they never stopped caring as much as they pretended. Maybe the distance you interpreted as indifference was actually hesitation. Maybe they wanted to reach out many times but stopped themselves because they didn't know whether you wanted to hear from them. And perhaps they have secretly wondered whether you noticed their struggle at all. That is why their next step could matter so much, not because you should expect a dramatic confession, but because honesty often begins with one small sentence that someone has rehearsed countless times. There is something I never told you. Those words can carry an entire history behind them. And if they ever say them, listen carefully, not just to what they confess, but to what they have been trying to communicate through all the silence before it. Something huge is waiting ahead, because the secret may finally reveal why they were crying in the first place, and the answer may be far more emotional than you imagined. The truth may be closer to the surface than you think, because people can hide their words much longer than they can hide the way those words make them feel. This person may have spent days acting completely normal while carrying an emotional storm privately. They may laugh with others, continue their routine, answer messages, and appear perfectly composed, yet one memory connected to you can suddenly make that composure disappear. Maybe they have opened an old conversation and stared at it without typing anything. Maybe they have written something to you, read it twice, and deleted it because the words suddenly felt too revealing. Maybe they have stood at the edge of reaching out and then convinced themselves to wait one more day. But one more day can become another week, and another week can become months. That is how a secret becomes heavy. Not because it is necessarily terrible, but because the person carrying it keeps imagining every possible reaction. And there is one thought they may secretly fear more than anything: that you will never know how much they actually cared. But there is a deeper layer here. Their tears may be connected to the realization that they misunderstood something about you. Perhaps they once believed you would always be available, always understand, always remain exactly where they left you emotionally. Then life changed, circumstances changed, or your attention shifted, and suddenly they began seeing your connection through different eyes. They may now be wondering whether they took your presence for granted. Whether they dismissed moments that should have mattered. Whether they were too proud to say what they really felt when the opportunity was right in front of them. That kind of realization can be incredibly emotional because it forces someone to confront their own choices. They cannot rewrite yesterday, but they can finally decide whether they are going to keep hiding behind silence. Stay till the end, because the next piece of this story explains why this person may have been fighting their emotions even when nobody else could see the struggle. And perhaps the most unexpected revelation is this: they may not actually be waiting for you to make the first move anymore. They may be trying to gather enough courage to speak for themselves. Not necessarily with some dramatic declaration, but with one honest conversation where they finally stop pretending everything is simple. They may tell you about something they kept private. They may explain why they pulled back. They may admit that certain moments affected them far more deeply than they showed. Or they may finally confess that they cared long after they convinced everyone, including themselves, that they had moved forward. This is why you should listen without immediately filling in the blanks for them. Let their words belong to them. Because if they truly decide to reveal what has been hidden, the most powerful part may not be the secret itself. It may be the reason they finally chose to tell you. Don't skip, because we are getting closer to that reason, and when you understand it, several moments from the past may suddenly make much more sense. There is a truth hidden underneath all their hesitation that may explain why their emotions have become impossible to ignore. They may have been trying to convince themselves that they could live peacefully without ever telling you what was really in their heart. For a while, they may have succeeded. They kept busy, surrounded themselves with distractions, and avoided anything that reminded them of the connection. But eventually, the quiet moments returned, and so did the thoughts they had pushed away. They may have realized that moving forward does not always mean forgetting what mattered. Sometimes it means finally being honest about what happened inside you. And that honesty can be incredibly emotional when someone knows they waited too long. Perhaps they are crying because they remember the exact moments when they could have spoken but chose silence. Perhaps they remember looking at you while holding back words that were desperately trying to come out. You may never have known how much was happening behind that calm expression. Stay till the end, because there is another part of this secret that changes the entire meaning of their silence. What they may finally be realizing is that they were not protecting themselves from you, they were protecting themselves from vulnerability. They wanted certainty before they spoke. They wanted to know exactly what you felt, exactly how you would respond, exactly where everything would lead. But feelings rarely offer that kind of guarantee. So they waited for signs. They analyzed conversations. They replayed your reactions. They searched for meaning in small details. And every time they thought they had enough courage, uncertainty pulled them backward. Yet something has shifted. Maybe they recently remembered a moment when you needed them and they were emotionally unavailable. Maybe they suddenly understood that your silence was not rejection but your own attempt to protect your feelings. Or maybe they realized that both of you could have been waiting for the other person to become brave first. That possibility alone can bring tears, because it creates the painful question: how different could things have been if I had simply told the truth? Now listen closely, because this is where the hidden secret may become more specific. There could be something they have wanted you to understand about their behavior. A reason behind a distance. A reason behind a missed opportunity. A reason behind a sudden change in communication. And when they finally explain it, you may discover that the story you created in your mind was incomplete. Their actions may have looked cold while their emotions were anything but cold. Their silence may have looked like indifference while they were privately struggling with feelings they did not know how to express. Their absence may have looked like a decision to leave, when internally they were questioning whether they had already lost something meaningful. don't skip. Something huge is waiting ahead, because the secret they have been protecting may not simply be about what they feel for you. It may be about one particular truth they have been terrified you would finally understand. Something they have never told you may have started with a moment so small that you probably never realized its importance. Perhaps it was the first time they understood that your presence affected them differently. Maybe they caught themselves waiting for your message, remembering your words, or searching for you in a crowded room without even thinking about it. That realization may have frightened them because suddenly the connection had become more meaningful than they were prepared to admit. Instead of saying it, they hid it. Instead of asking what you felt, they guessed. And instead of risking an honest conversation, they created explanations that allowed them to remain silent. But emotions have a strange way of returning when everything becomes quiet. This person may now be looking back and realizing that some of their strongest feelings were born during moments you probably considered completely ordinary. Stay till the end, because one of those moments may hold the key to everything they have been unable to tell you. Then came the part they may regret most, the moment they had an opportunity to be honest and chose not to be. Perhaps you asked them a question and they gave you a safer answer. Perhaps you opened a door emotionally and they stepped away because they were afraid of what might happen if they walked through it. Maybe they wanted to say, "I care about you more than I should," but replaced those words with something casual. Maybe they wanted to tell you that losing your presence would hurt, but acted as though they could easily move on. That is the kind of hidden truth that can stay with someone for a long time. Not because the past can be changed, but because the mind keeps creating alternate versions of what could have happened. And now, when they are alone, they may be wondering whether you ever saw through their performance. Whether you knew their distance was not the whole story. Whether you understood that behind every restrained response was something they were desperately trying not to reveal. But the most emotional part may be what they want you to know now. They may not want you to feel guilty. They may not expect you to repair everything. They may simply want you to understand that their silence had a story behind it. That there were feelings they did not know how to express, memories they never stopped carrying, and words they repeatedly postponed because they were afraid of the consequences. Perhaps they have finally reached the point where keeping everything hidden hurts more than being vulnerable. And if that moment comes, the truth may arrive in a surprisingly simple form. An unexpected message, an honest conversation, or a sentence that begins with, "I never told you this, but, don't skip," because that sentence could open the door to the revelation this entire story has been building toward. Something huge is waiting in what comes next, and it may explain why this person has been carrying these emotions for so long. The silence is beginning to tell its own story, because when someone has carried the same truth for too long, eventually even ordinary moments can expose what they are trying to hide. They may suddenly become quiet when your name comes up, look away when the conversation becomes personal, or hesitate before answering a question that seems completely harmless. You might think they are simply distracted, but inside, they could be fighting the urge to finally say everything. And perhaps the most difficult part is that they have already imagined the conversation countless times. In their mind, they have told you the secret. They have explained every confusing moment. They have finally admitted what they felt. Then reality returns, and the words disappear again. But something is different now. They may no longer be satisfied with simply imagining honesty. They may be realizing that there comes a point when silence stops protecting your heart and starts keeping you trapped inside your own unanswered questions. Stay till the end, because the next revelation brings us closer to the one thing they have been afraid you might discover. Think about the possibility that they have been carrying one particular sentence they never had the courage to finish. Maybe it begins with, "I wanted to tell you," maybe it is, "I never stopped." Or perhaps it is something even simpler, "You mattered more to me than I ever showed." Imagine carrying those words while continuing to act as though everything is normal. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to confess, and every opportunity becomes another reason to remain silent. They may have feared appearing too emotional. They may have worried that you would see their vulnerability and interpret it differently than they intended. They may even have convinced themselves that you had already moved on, making honesty feel pointless. But then a memory returns unexpectedly, and all those carefully controlled emotions rise again. This could be why their tears are not necessarily about what happened yesterday. They may be about everything they never allowed themselves to say when it mattered most. And now comes the part you should remember carefully: the secret may not have one single sentence. It may be an entire truth about how they experienced your connection. They may finally reveal that they cared during moments when they looked indifferent, missed you during periods when they appeared completely fine, and thought about reaching out during times when you assumed they had forgotten. That does not automatically mean the future will unfold exactly as either of you imagines. It means there may be an emotional reality that was hidden behind the version of events you could see. And if this person ever chooses to open that door, the most powerful response may simply be to listen. Let them finish. Let them tell their story without rushing to decide what it means. Because there is still one final layer beneath this secret, something they may have been unable to admit even to themselves. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because once that hidden layer comes into the light, you may finally understand why their emotions became so overwhelming in the first place. The part they have struggled to admit may be the simplest truth of all: they cared more deeply than they ever allowed themselves to show. For so long, they may have tried to control how much you could see, carefully choosing their words, hiding their reactions, and pretending certain moments did not affect them. But eventually, a person can become exhausted from constantly editing their own emotions. Perhaps they are reaching that point now. Maybe they have realized that the memories they keep returning to are not random, and the emotions that surface when they think about you are not something they can simply explain away. They may remember the conversations that ended too soon, the opportunities they allowed to pass, and the words they almost said. All they can do is decide whether the truth deserves a voice now. Stay till the end, because the answer to that question may be closer than you think. There is also a possibility they have been hiding something from you because they were afraid of being misunderstood. Maybe they did not want you to think they were asking for anything in return. Maybe they were afraid that expressing their feelings would place pressure on you. So they chose silence instead. They may have thought, if I truly care about this person, should not make them responsible for what I feel. That decision may have looked mature from the outside, but privately it could have been incredibly difficult. They carried the emotion alone, watched life continue, and wondered whether you would ever discover what was beneath their restraint. Perhaps this is why their tears feel so complicated. They are not necessarily crying because they want something from you. They may be crying because they finally understand how much of their own heart they kept hidden just to maintain control. And somewhere inside, they may be asking themselves whether honesty would have been kinder, not only to you, but to themselves. But here is the revelation that connects everything: the secret may be less about a dramatic confession and more about a truth they have been afraid to face. You may have left a deeper impression on them than they expected. You may have become part of memories they cannot simply erase, even after trying to move forward. And perhaps they are finally admitting that pretending not to care never actually made them care less. It only made the feelings harder to understand. If they come forward, their words may not be perfectly organized. They might hesitate. They might change their sentence halfway through. They might become emotional and need a moment before continuing. That does not necessarily mean they are hiding something. it may mean they are finally saying something they have practiced keeping silent for a very long time. Don't skip, because we are approaching the final piece now. Something huge is waiting in the last revelation, the one truth they may have wanted you to know all along, but were never brave enough to say directly. The truth they may have been carrying was never simply about one message, one memory, or one unfinished conversation. It may have been about the place you quietly occupied in their heart while they were pretending they had everything under control. They may have wanted to tell you that there were moments when they missed you but stayed silent, moments when they wanted to reach out but stopped, and moments when your name appeared in their thoughts and suddenly everything they had tried to suppress came rushing back. Perhaps they cried because they finally understood that the hardest thing was not caring. It was pretending they did not. And maybe the secret they never had the courage to tell you was simply this: you mattered to me far more than I ever knew how to explain. That sentence may contain all the conversations they never started, all the emotions they never revealed, and all the memories they carried quietly. So if this story reminded you of someone, remember that silence does not always have one meaning. Sometimes people hide because they are confused. Sometimes because they are afraid of rejection. Sometimes because they do not know whether the other person still wants to hear the truth. And sometimes they simply need time to understand their own heart. But there is something you should never forget: you cannot know another person's private feelings with certainty unless they choose to communicate them. You can notice patterns, remember moments, and sense that something feels unfinished, but the truth ultimately belongs to them. If they ever come forward, let their words speak for themselves. Do not force a confession out of them. Do not build an entire future around a possibility. Simply listen if they decide to become honest. Maybe they will tell you about the night they cried while remembering you. Maybe they will finally explain why they pulled away when they wanted to stay close. Maybe they will reveal that something you considered insignificant became one of their most meaningful memories. Or maybe their secret will be completely different from what you imagined. And that is exactly why the most powerful ending is not assuming the answer, it is allowing truth to arrive in its own words. Stay till the end, because there is one final thought you need to carry with you after everything you have heard. If someone you love really is carrying an unspoken truth, you do not need to chase them, pressure them, or decode every little action. Give honesty a safe place to exist. Sometimes the most meaningful conversation begins without a dramatic entrance. It begins with a simple moment of openness where someone finally feels that they can speak without being judged. And perhaps that is what this person has needed all along: not a perfect opportunity, not a guaranteed response, but the courage to stop hiding behind everything they have been afraid to say. Maybe one day they will look at you and finally finish the sentence they have rehearsed in their mind for so long. There is something I never told you, and when that moment comes, you may understand why their silence was never as empty as it appeared. Behind it was a story. Behind the story were feelings. Behind those feelings was a truth they struggled to express. And perhaps the greatest revelation is not whether they were crying over you, it is realizing that somewhere along the way, you became important enough for them to carry words about you that they were never brave enough to speak. There is still one thing left to understand, because sometimes the final piece of an emotional story is not what someone says, it is what finally gives them the courage to say it. This person may have spent so long protecting their secret that they forgot what it felt like to be completely honest. They may have told themselves that enough time would make the feelings disappear, that staying busy would make the memories less powerful, or that eventually they would stop wondering what could have happened if they had spoken sooner. But time does not always erase an unanswered question. Sometimes it makes the question louder. And the question they may now be facing is painfully simple: what if I had told them everything? Maybe that is why their emotions have surfaced again. They may be remembering the moments when you were close, the moments when they had the perfect opportunity to speak, and the moments when they chose silence instead. They may not be crying because they expect anything from you. They may simply be mourning the honesty they never allowed themselves to have. Stay till the end, because there is one final truth about this secret that changes the way you should look at everything you have heard. What if their deepest secret is not that they wanted you to come back, stay, or change your life for them? What if it is simply that they never wanted you to believe you meant nothing? That possibility explains why someone could remain silent while still carrying so many emotions. They may have worried that their distance would make you think they never cared. They may have wondered whether you interpreted their quietness as rejection, when inside they were struggling to understand what they felt themselves. And perhaps they have replayed one particular moment when they could have reassured you but didn't. One sentence could have changed the entire meaning of that moment, but they remained quiet. Now they may wish they could go back, not to control the outcome, but simply to tell you what they should have said then. Maybe it would be as simple as, "I did care. I just didn't know how to show you." Imagine how much emotion can exist behind a sentence that short. Imagine carrying it for months or years without knowing whether the person you care about will ever understand it. And now, my beloved child, take this final message slowly. If someone you love is carrying a secret they never had the courage to tell you, their truth deserves honesty, not assumptions. If they choose to speak, listen. If they need time, allow them that space. And if they never reveal everything, do not spend your life destroying your peace trying to solve a mystery you cannot personally confirm. You deserve clarity, but clarity should come through communication, not endless guessing. Perhaps this person will eventually gather the courage to tell you what they have been carrying. Perhaps one unexpected conversation will reveal why they were distant, why certain memories affected them so deeply, and why their emotions remained hidden behind a calm face. And when that moment arrives, the most powerful thing you can do may be remarkably simple: listen with an open heart and let the truth be exactly what it is. Because the greatest revelation in this entire story was never about predicting someone else's secret. It was about understanding the extraordinary weight of words left unspoken, and realizing that sometimes the sentence someone cries over the most is the sentence they wish they had found the courage to say when they still had the chance.